Rhyme and Reasoning Comic Book Club. I'm your host, Big Papa, and we've been going through three comic books over the whole summer. We've been doing the comic book club, and we've read everything from Batman and Superman. So we read a different one this month. But before we do that, let me get you the co-host in here. First of all, our comic book club. He joined us when we first started, and now he's been kind of the regular with us here. Gabriel Feliciano,
What up, though?
and of course, my co-host with the most, Victor Jr.
What's up? How's it going?
Okay, guys, we went ahead and read a different book this time, and I say different because it was a little more difficult for me for the new comic book type readers. This month's comic book is called The Avengers Kree Skrull War. Victor, you want to give us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Avengers Kree War is a book written by Roy Thomas with pencils by Neil Adams, Sal Buscema, and John Buscema. Inkers are Tom Palmer, Sam Granger, Sal Buscema, George Russo's, Alan Weiss, and Neil Adams, and letters by Sam Rosen, Art Semick, and Mike Stevens. This is an Avengers story written in 1972, so exactly 10 years after the Avengers debut. So the events of this story take place in Avengers number 89 to 97. And I guess we should just jump into it, you know?
Yeah. Before we, I guess that later on we can give our thoughts and what I meant when I said it was a little more difficult for the new type of comic book reader like myself. Because I also want to see how you guys took it. I know Gabe getting back into the comic book world and you being a constant comic book reader. But I mean, somebody like me, I want to give you my thoughts. But we'll get to that after we talk about the story.
Cool.
Go ahead.
So, we'll run through the story just like we did with Kingdom Come. We started off seeing the people who are the Avengers at this time. So let's go through a little history real quick. The normal Avengers that we know are Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, the Wasp, Giant Man, or Ant-Man, and the Incredible Hulk. Those are the original founding Avengers, minus Cap. Cap comes in later. He comes in along with the Kooky Quartet, which is the Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. This is that era. So the original Avengers have already left. They've decided that the new Avengers are doing just fine on their own, and they're going to go do their own things in their own books. So the Avengers was pretty much relegated to the C-list heroes at this point. And we see these heroes chasing down Captain Marvel. And as we get into here, I want to know what you guys know about Marvel before coming into the story. Dad?
Honestly, I didn't know anything about Marvel. It kind of threw me
Perfect.
for a loop because
Uh-huh.
it's I mean, because I remember Captain Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
but Marvel. I mean, I didn't.
Like
I
Captain
guess I
Marvel
was.
from DC?
Yeah, but I also
Mhm.
knew. I remember in the Avengers movie there was a girl.
Yeah, Carol.
Okay, that's who I
And
was.
who makes an appearance in this book?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I did remember that scene. That yeah.
Yeah, she works for she works for Shield, but I think in this she works for the Air Force, and she's at Cape Canaveral.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the Avengers are trying to hunt down Captain Marvel. We don't know why yet, but we catch up with Rick Jones, and again another character I wanted to see if you guys knew anything about. Gabe or Dad?
Um, Rick Jones, yeah, because he's the guy that basically the Hulk or Bruce Banner went to like save during
Mhm.
the explosion of the gamma. Like what basically turned him into Hulk or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like also I think at that time like he was the one that would almost like used as a plot device, for Marvel back in them days as well.
Mhm.
not just with the Avengers or the Hulk or something like that. But I know he was used a lot back then.
Yeah, he was pretty much the group's sidekick.
Yeah,
And doing some research, I found out he was really just hopping around other people's books at this point.
yeah,
And at this very moment, he was in the Captain Marvel series, and they were doing a sort of thing like Shazam, like from
yeah.
DC. So he would hit his nega bands together, and then he would switch places with Captain Marvel, who was at this time, as we see in the story, trapped in the negative zone. So we follow what happened before the Avengers, got in contact with Marvel, and it turns out that Rick Jones performing, at a concert, having a great time, and he starts feeling real woozy, and he walks out, and he gets contacted by Marvel, who's like, "Hey, I'm in the negative zone. Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four just came in here, and I saw him leave. So I know it's possible to leave. So like, let's go do this now." Because he's been having to switch places with Rick, like for the past like I think couple months in the stories. I mean, in real life. So he has Rick go to the Baxter building to open up their portal to the negative zone so that Marvel can get out. And that's when the Avengers, lounging over at Avengers Mansion, get a distress signal from the Fantastic Four's building, and it says, "Hey, anyone nearby that can help?" Because of course the Fantastic Four are never around whenever there's other stories going on. So they all get there, and that's when we get to the point. No, I think this is a little bit before. They all get there, and Annihilus appears. And Annihilus is another character that I'm sure, Dad, maybe you've never heard of. They've mentioned him a few times in any of the Fantastic Four like adaptations, like the show, not the shows, the movies. But he's just a being from the negative zone. He's he's more important later down the line during Annihilation, which is an event that happens in like the early 2000s. But he's just a dude from the negative zone who wants to control like everything.
I know he was a big like with the Fantastic Four as well too. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their stories and whatnot.
Yep. So he comes out of the negative zone. They all tussle a little bit, and then the Vision gets in between Annihilus and the negative zone and does the old intangible switcheroo. And Annihilus trying to grab Vision falls back into the negative zone, not before saying, "Avengers, you'll rule the day, like, as every villain does."
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they realize that Marvel stole the Quinjet during that whole thing and is trying to run off. The Avengers go after Marvel, and we keep switching back to what is going on now. So they had already stopped Marvel, and they have the U.S. government. I forget what they're trying to do. Are they trying to wake up Marvel, or they're trying to?
Isn't the Stanley
But
lookalike doctor?
Yeah, it was Stanley look-like doctor.
yeah, I believe they were trying to, because he was like being so long to the negative zone. I think like the effects of it kind of like hurt him or something like that as well too.
Mm.
Or like,
So then they get the Vision across from him and shoots him with a blast, and I guess it worked, but they're both like kind of unconscious for now. At the very same time, Rick Jones is being I think he's being telecommunicated a little bit.
mm-hmm.
No, they're not. I think they just switch over. Yeah. So we switch over to the Kree Supreme Intelligence and Ronan the Accuser, which I'm sure both of you recognize from the Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yeah.
Ronan is just a fanatic who, at this point, becomes the leader, the usurper of the Kree Empire, and he sends the Sentry,
Yeah.
the Kree Sentry, down to Earth to go get Marvel, to go bring him back, I guess. And let's see.
Well, just to say, Rick, here, I mean,
Hmm.
you're ending book one here, and
Yeah.
the people who have not read this yet, there's several books in this one. I believe
I
I
think
don't
it's
even know the number.
like
How many?
9 or something like that.
9.
Yeah.
And those of you who have listened to this comic book club before know that well, Vic is very knowledgeable on all of this, and Vic and Gabe, and he loves speaking about this. So, any of you guys ever want to talk comic books, please, you should reach out to them. Obviously, I'm going to be the one to say reach out to them because you call me. I'm not going to be able to help you. But in the interest of keeping Vic going here, Vic, I want you mind if I give you the books and then we can see when you go from there? Because you just finished the book one. Now you're going into Avengers. It's called Judgment Day,
Hmm.
and this one is it's a cover with Quicksilver and Wanda and Vision,
Yeah,
and
and they're facing off against Eight Man, Hank Pym,
yeah,
and passed out Janet Van Dyne.
and I believe that's that Rick guy in the back.
Yeah, Rick
Um,
Yep.
and
Jones.
then the wasp right there on the floor.
Hmm.
But this is where I started taking a little bit more of understanding what's going on because book one is very confusing, guys. Very
Yeah,
confusing for me.
I wanted to go through book one real quick just because, I think it's the one that jumps around the most. From here on out, it's pretty much one story going forward.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say because I know book one. I guess what confused me is jumping around, but thank God. I mean, it was like watching a movie because they had a narrator through it. And,
Yeah, I don't think in the 70s they were very like conscious about where your mind was going while you were reading. They were just
Hmm.
like, hey, a 10-year-old's gonna buy this off the stand and they're gonna
yeah,
get the story and then maybe next week they'll buy it.
and it's funny with the little notes that say "Stan."
Oh yeah, I love the little boxes where it's like last dish, Stan, or this happened in Fantastic Four #2.
Well, and he did that to kind of help out the novice reader,
Mm-hmm.
that just to, you know, they get like as seen from issue, blah blah blah, whatever, just to kind of know where, like, if you're interested in what happened prior, you can go
Mm-hmm.
pick up that issue and then kind of get an understanding.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, Vic, you want to go into book two real quick? Just
Yeah.
tell us what happened.
Yeah, so the Sentry comes and fights the Avengers. And I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think about this team of Avengers? We've only seen this team really in the live action in one movie, and they don't really get that much time to shine. But what do you think about the three or the four: Goliath, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver? Are they good
Well,
fighters? Are they what you think about when you think of Avengers?
I didn't Goliath. I was always it's just the one from X-Men. So
Goliath?
yeah,
Oh, you're
Oh,
probably
you're thinking
thinking
about
about Colossus.
Colossus.
Yeah.
Colossus. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Hawkeye, Clint Barton, who is taking Hank Pym's growth serum to become Goliath.
Yeah,
Okay.
see, and if
That
it
makes
wasn't for this
sense.
issue, I would have never known that because I didn't know he was actually um Goliath. So that was kind of,
Yeah, they it takes a while for them to even say his name.
yeah.
Like besides Goliath, they call him
Okay.
Clint a couple times.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
when I
Towards.
saw that, I was like, what's he doing as a somebody else? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one thing you'll learn with these older comics too, is that a lot of these guys had identity issues.
yeah.
Like we see later on before the issue where going inside of the android with Hank Pym, he is Yellow Jacket, and then when he reappears, he's Ant-Man, and it's kind of like a running gag in the comic world where it's like, well, which personality is Hank Pym using today?
Right.
He changes constantly.
Yeah.
Um, go
That
ahead.
was in one of the other books, but yeah. No. No. I didn't know that was him, but as far as the like you said the term earlier, the C group. Um. I mean, I don't know much about Quicksilver because he got killed right away in the movie.
Hmm.
So I don't know much about him. I think it's kind of cool how they start showing Wanda and Vision's interest in each other.
Hmm.
Yes.
Right out. I think in book two when they're at the island,
Yes.
they start there. But so
And that
what
was the
happened?
kickoff of that too, actually, if I'm not mistaken, like in the
Yeah.
Marvel world.
This is like the first time everyone was like, Wait a second, or is Scarlet Witch and Vision a thing?"
Yeah, and then I mean in this book they have to go out to an island because Ink disappeared, right?
Yeah. So it's basically the Century takes Captain Marvel away, but at the same time they get a distress signal from a base that Hank Pym is at in the Arctic, who's just there happenstance. But it just so happens that that's exactly where Marvel was taken by the Century,
Okay.
because it used to be an old Kree outpost, and this is where we also get a little bit of a uh you know explanation for later in the story about the Inhumans and what their relation is to the Kree,
Yeah.
which is that the Kree came to Earth, however long ago, and they were experimenting on humans, and they created the Inhumans, and they've as like a little settlement, like a colonial settlement on Earth, and and then they left and decided that Earth was not really worth much, that the Kree was way more advanced, so they just left Earth to do its thing. And we even get a little bit of a Marvel origin here, which is pretty nice. On page 31, we get to see that Marvel was sent to Earth to basically colonize it and get it ready for the Kree to come. And he went back on it and said, "Nah, like I actually like these people, and I like the people that I've met here. They've shown me that the Earth is worth it."
Hmm.
So he stays on Earth and becomes Captain Marvel, and eventually later down the line he meets Rick Jones. We also get a little bit of backstory as to what Ronan has against the Earth, and it's that when he came, he was met by the Fantastic Four, and they beat his ass back to the Kree Galaxy.
Yep.
And so moving forward, the Avengers are Avengers Mansion, and they get that distress signal from Hank Pym. And when they land there, they're met by Janet, who is when as I was reading this, I realized that they didn't write women that well in the 70s, and I realized it a little bit earlier when they were whenever Wanda would talk, and Clint would and Pietro would just constantly remind her, "You're a woman, don't talk, you don't know that much."
Yeah.
Yeah, they shut her up a lot.
Yeah, I unfortunately I think that's just the times.
Yeah. The views of the times definitely kind of reflected it in the writing.
Yeah, and even so, Janet starts recounting what happened to the Avengers, and all of a sudden a great green island appeared in the Arctic, and Hank and Janet went to go check it out. As they were getting closer, Hank realizes that something is dragging him like closer to it, like he feels something like different going on. So 10 years before he infamously slaps his wife,
Hmm.
he backhands her off the dragonfly here. So that I don't know if you're aware, but Hank Pym is pretty notorious in the comics. For 10 years after this, he slaps his wife,
No, I know that.
Janet Van Dyne, and he's like just known as a woman abuser for the rest of until today. There's comics that I'm reading from the 2000s that are still impacted by Hank Pym slapping his wife in the 80s. But he does it here a whole 10 years before to save her life, of course, but he still
Yeah.
slaps her.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she lands, and that's conveniently when the Avengers showed up, and they go into the jungle to try to see if they can find Hank, but they don't find Hank, and they just find Ronan the Accuser. Ronan gets the I, he seemingly gets Goliath on his side to fight the other Avengers,
Hmm.
and then Janet,
Just captured as well.
yeah, they all get captured here, don't they?
No, the Pedro and Wanda get away.
All right, Pietro, Wanda, and Rick get away,
Hmm.
and then Hank Pym is revealed to have turned into a giant ape man,
Yep.
and then we move on to the next issue.
Where
Yeah.
he got
So.
Oh, yeah,
evolutionized or something like.
de-evolved by Ronan the
Yeah. There you
Accuser.
go.
And in this next issue, we find out that just skip ahead a little bit. We find out that that's what Ronan wants. He feels offended that the humans have made it this far without the Kree's help or the Kree's hand. So he wants to de-evolve, and I have it in my notes because I think it's hilarious that we keep getting reminded in the rest of the story that Earth is some backwater planet that has life that has more in common with the amoeba. Because they say it twice. Ronan says it here in this issue where let's see. He's talking to the Scarlet Witch and Marvel, no, Scarlet Witch and Vision, I think, and he's laughing at them because they're trapped together and they're having a really dramatic moment, and it's that moment right before they kiss in this issue, and he's just laughing at them. He goes, "Your love is nothing. An android and an atom-born mutant, rejected offspring of the Earthian technology, in love. This sight alone was worth my joining the Century here after teleporting him to these once icy wastes. But I speak of love and other lower and baser emotions. There's one final grouping I must check, the girl called Jan." And he switches over to go see what happens to Jan. But this dude's just an asshole. He he's like a mutant and an android game together.
Yeah.
What kind of planet is this?
Yeah, when I read that, I was laughing. I was like, "Is this guy really just saying this?" I mean,
Yeah, so this is the era where villains just like to monologue, and you really get to see that here. For time purposes, I'm gonna keep rolling through these. But basically, Hank Pym, even though he's de-evolved, is able to fight off the. There was 3 scientists here on this base before it became Ronan the Accuser's like little forward base on Earth, and they all got de-evolved too. And Hank Pym beats them away because he's protecting a she was passed out, not anymore, but she Janet Van Dyne, his wife. And they have some weird implications about what he's gonna do with Janet Van Dyne, but nonetheless we go forward. And this is the scene when Ronan starts saying, what his plan is. And he's telling Marvel, and he grabs a frog and he's like, what better way to show you than to do this to this frog right here? He puts him in a jar, presses a button, and it just turns him into goop. And that's Ronan's big plan. And he even tells Marvel, like, I'm here, it's simple. I'm going to turn them all to goop amoebas. So Marvel looks defeated as hell on page 57. And we get to Quicksilver and Rick Jones outside the base as Quicksilver cannonballs himself into the base, which is a move we
just
see.
just a side note. Just a side note. You mentioned about how he looks defeated with this is most of this book until like the last chapter.
Yeah.
This is Marvel throughout the whole book besides the last chapter.
I agree. I really do agree. But no one draws Marvel looking defeated like this. Like this is really good drawing. And we go back to Quicksilver, who cannonballs through the base, which is a move we see Quicksilver do a lot in this book.
Pretty much, I don't think he was running at all. He was just pretty much like Sonic the Hedgehog or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
You know what it reminded me of? I've been watching wrestling again.
uh-huh.
And they just move these big guys do. They get out the ring and they just start running around the ring and bulldozing everybody around the ring. That's exactly what this reminded me of when I read it.
Getting momentum going.
It's basically what Pietro's doing. And so they get into the base and they're able to free the Vision and Wanda. But the Ronin gets, a hold of himself and activates his sentry again. And then a whole ballroom blitz occurs, But it turns out in the middle of this fight, transmission is given to Ronin that the Kree and the Skrulls are now at war. So up until this point, we've been only dealing with the Kree, and a radical person of the Kree Empire that we've seen. It's just Ronin. But now we know that the Skrulls, who have been introduced before in Marvel, I don't think it's on this page, but we get reminded that they appeared in Fantastic Four #2.
And
A long time
before you
ago.
say anything, like, because you keep on saying, Fantastic Four, just want to remind everyone the reason why, though, because at the time, Fantastic Four was the flagship of Marvel. They were pretty much like the face of you know, the company, and like most of the main stories was dealt with the Fantastic Four.
Really? I was wondering why they were treating them like they were kings. I mean,
because they are.
the book was very, very. I guess what am I looking for here? Book was very. They put it right there, like, hey, the Fantastic Four ain't here right now. The
Hmm.
Mhm.
Fantastic Four is coming. Oh, the Fantastic Four is here. Oh my God! Like they're treating them like kings.
And it was
It
Yeah,
was
because of
very
that
apparent.
reason.
Yeah, it was very apparent. I mean, the way they did it.
and it's also important to mention that this is actually one of the first big crossovers at Marvel. So up until this point, it was always like 1-to-1. So the Fantastic Four would be crossing over with Spider-Man, or Spider-Man in the Fantastic Four, or Fantastic Four in the X-Men. It's very 1-to-1. But as we see throughout this entire book, we get the Fantastic Four, we get the Inhumans. We never get any mutants besides Wanda and Pietro. But it's this is like the big event.
Hmm.
This is the first time they actually told one story through multiple
Yeah, I
issues.
think before that, it was like the Galactic series or something like that, where
Yeah, it
you
was
know,
in the Fantastic Four stories.
yeah,
So back into it, Ronan gets that distress call about the Skrulls invading the Kree Empire. So he goes back to the Kree and he leaves the Sentry behind. He leaves whatever the fuck he was doing on Earth behind. He
hmm,
leaves his little science experiment that he left a whole civilization for, and he dips. And as he's dipping at the same time, all the de-evolution stops being, uh, used. I guess the three scientists become human again, and Hank becomes human again. And they're about to leave the Arctic, and they start thinking about what's to come. They fought one side of the Kree Skrull War, and it was Ronan and his little advanced party. But what's next? And that's when we get to Avengers No More, the
Okay, hold
next
on.
issue.
Before you go there, just mention that the Wasp and Hank retired at that moment as well.
Yes. Yeah. So they had been kind of retired up before this, but after this, they're like, you know what? We really don't want anything to do with the Avengers.
yeah, because they were working for the government, weren't they?
Yeah. I think that's where that they were at that research lab with those
Yeah.
three people.
Okay.
Uh, which is like, pretty much where they like to be. Hank's not really much of a fighter; he's a scientist. And Janet, at this point, because she's written the way she is, just wants to be wherever Hank is. And so yeah, we move into Avengers 92, which I read this 2 times because I had forgotten that I had read it, and then a week went by, and I started reading it again. But this is like one of my favorite issues because of the events that happen. So
Mhm.
um we pick up with the Avengers lounging over at Avengers Mansion, and can we give the Vision some props for his white turtleneck here,
Right, like definitely stylish.
playing chess by himself?
See, I didn't see that.
And again, the time that this was written is very apparent in how they speak to Wanda. It's like you wouldn't think that any of them are friends the way they're speaking to each other,
Or
but
sister.
yeah, or her or their sister. But this is how it goes. And I think this was the status quo for these Avengers, because I'm pretty sure the original were a lot nicer to each other, and they only
Hmm.
had Janet Van Dyne to like bounce off of and be a little misogynistic. But these
Yeah,
guys are. Let's. I'm gonna list here a couple things about these Avengers that might interest you guys. But these guys are kind of born from evil. Hawkeye used to be a criminal before he became an Avenger.
yeah,
It was Captain America who set him straight and told him that he can be better. Wanda and Pietro were mutant terrorists with their father Magneto, and the Vision is created by the android Ultron.
yeah.
So they're all Avengers with storied past, but they come together to do good because that's what the Avengers are about. And it gets revealed while they're hanging around Avengers Mansion that the three scientists that they saved started spilling secrets out there, and more importantly, started saying that the Avengers are hiding stuff. That the Avengers told them not to tell anyone about what happened over at
Yeah,
the
like they
Arctic.
swore him to secrecy or something.
Yeah. And as we go forward, we'll realize that these guys made a mistake, and they even realize they made a mistake. But up to this point, now HM, I think it's Warren Craddock. Yeah,
Yeah,
Warren
Warren
Craddock,
credit.
who when I read this, I instantly saw like a little parallel between this and McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind, McCarthy trying to find communists in the back in the Cold War, and McCarthy, Mr. Craddock here is trying to, find the truth about what happened with the aliens, but more importantly, as the story goes on, try to, get aliens off of Earth by any means necessary.
Yep.
And we'll get to the little like reveal at the end, but we'll just keep going forward. So the Goliath hears something go on outside. Wait, no, does that happen here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they see that Marvel.
Page 76 is when Goliath goes outside.
Yeah, there's that little helicopter scene beforehand, though. That's what I'm looking at, and it's Carol coming to warn them, I think.
Oh yeah, give him a heads up of
Yeah, give them a heads up of what's going down, and for some reason she crashes because Marvel flies out and crashes into the helicopter.
It's a little plane, actually.
Yeah, it's all a little weird. The
Oh, no, it's
sequencing here.
helicopter, sorry.
Yeah, the sequencing here is a little weird, but the vision helps the helicopter from crashing, and then Carol steps out, and then Carol tells all of them, like, hey, this is what's going on. We even get a little bit of an early appearance of Nick Fury.
Yep.
He doesn't have his eye patch here, which is pretty interesting. And as we move forward, Carol tells Captain Marvel, hey, we should go to my farm and like lay low before Craddock comes with the bandwagon and tries to get you out of here forcibly. And as we move forward, we even see a little bit of a foreshadowing where Rick is like, damn, everything's a little bit too complicated right now and it's all falling apart. I missed the time that I don't even remember in my comic books when the world was filled with simpler heroes. And we see a page where we see the invaders of the 40s. So Captain America, the original Human Torch, and Namor the Submariner, and a few other, I don't know, I guess they were Marvel comics or just published comics from the 40s. And Rick has a really profound moment where he goes, let's face it, the world ain't like how it is anymore, if it ever really was, and there ain't no... He goes, these days, you can't tell the good guys from the bad guys without a scorecard, and there ain't no scorecard, which I think is a cool, like, little tidbit, especially with the Avengers that we're working with in this story. But yeah, the scene that I wanted to talk about was where the Avengers get goaded into being served.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. Like,
that's when Goliath went outside.
Yeah. So they hear some guy getting...
Yeah, you see the trend of Goliath too. He's a bit of a like
Hothead?
Yeah, and easily like provoked.
Yeah, so Goliath hears something out the window, and it's some dude getting hassled for seemingly defending the Avengers outside of Avengers Mansion. And so Goliath goes out there to grab the guy, and he's like, why don't you pick on someone your own size or whatever? And then the guy that was getting harassed, he's like, even you should know this was a setup.
Yeah.
Here's your court serving. Here's your summons. Come to court. And then that's when the Avengers like, well, damn, we got served. Time to go to court.
Yeah. Which
I didn't expect, because this is not something that happens in Marvel that I read now. If the Avengers get summoned to court, they just don't show up, But these guys end up showing up, and the Fantastic Four are there as well. Reed Richards and the Thing, which I wonder if this is really the Fantastic Four. Knowing what we know later on.
I took it as it wasn't.
Okay.
I took it as it wasn't. Just so you know. I don't care what you think.
I didn't take it as.
So I guess we can go over the spoilers. I feel like if anyone's reading this with us, they would have already read it. But as we know, there are Skrulls on Earth already. and they're posing as different people. I won't specify the big reveal yet, but this I don't know now if this is Skrulls, but it feels very much like it, especially
Mhm.
with the way the thing antagonizes Goliath
Yeah.
and the information that Reed gives them. It feels like they're setting up the Avengers in a nice way, where it's like, yeah, we're not involved with you, so we're just going to tell the government everything that we know and see what they do with that information with you guys, you know? So as we move forward, the basically the Avengers are being told that their involvement with what happened with the Kree is kind of a worldwide security issue, and
Like an
it's not,
act of treason against
yeah,
hum-
an act of
humanity.
an act of treason against humanity, and they're like, yeah, um, yeah, what says you? And the only one to say anything profound is Division,
Yeah.
who quickly realize that people don't think has a worthy opinion because he's not human. He's an android. And I also want to bring up, what do you guys think about how the Vision feels in this story, constantly going like, if I could feel this way, I would feel like this, and but I can't. Alas, I'm just an android. But it feels like he is feeling these things. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
But I think his whole like what's the word? That's keeping him fully committed to his feelings is the whole idea that I'm an android, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, so that's why he's like, I mean, he has a good understanding and explaining how he should be feeling or how he is feeling, but,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I'm not really gonna fully do it because,
I'm not gonna open that can of worms. I don't know what Hank Pym programmed into me.
yeah.
And so we see the Vision speak up where he's like, you're doing a lot of accusing, and it's not doing a lot for the world right now. So let me try to explain what's going on. And instantly, Kradic's like, no, I don't want to hear it. You're an android. We don't need to hear your opinion. At the very same time, Rick is getting visions from Marvell at the who just arrived at the farm of Carol,
Mhm.
and something's seemingly gone wrong. So Rick leaves the courtroom, and that's when Craddock is like, you know what? The meeting's adjourned. We'll pick up with this later. And the Avengers go back to Avengers Mansion, which has been broken into. Jarvis could not save anything, apparently. Uh, and when they get to Avengers Mansion, they're met by the Avengers. Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, who tell them that they did a bad job today. They they tried to save people, but they kept information from the proper authorities. And then when they were questioned about it, they seemingly were very like, we're not going to tell you anything. They were
Yep.
avoidant, and they're like, that's not what Avengers do. So from here on out, the Avengers are disassembled, and then they just teleport away, and then they leave Jarvis to clean up the mess. And that's when we jump to Avengers 93. And let me tell you guys, when we got to here is when I was like, holy shit, things are different.
Hmm.
And it's 100% the art by Neil Adams.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys noticed how different the art got from here on out.
Yeah, because
Mm,
it was a more of a newer, crisp compared to the classic um
Like house
style.
style.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely was. You know,
And
I
it's
didn't catch it.
oh, you didn't catch it?
The art difference? No.
Yeah. Well, I think because at this time they were going by like a house style, so they're all trying to draw the same. But I noticed the difference when we got to the Vision on this next issue. So page 85, we see that little panel of the Vision's face. The detail there is insane,
yeah, where he
and it
says,
gets
"Help me, please."
and it gets even crazier the next three panels down where it's Iron Man, like
Hmm.
the detail on the armor, the
Hmm.
it's
You even see his pupils almost like if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah, the old style. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. And also what I was gonna mention was you know the Avengers disassembling in the last issue was pretty like par for the course for what I know the Avengers are like today.
Hmm.
So I didn't think anything I didn't suspect any foul play at this point at all. What we know later is that these were the three Skrulls that are on Earth that they encounter later on in this issue that were posing as the Avengers and disassembled the Avengers just so that they could get them to, you know, go do the things that it's not really clear, but I guess the Skrulls anticipated that if they disassembled the Avengers, that the remaining Avengers would try to go find Marvel, who they knew that they already had, you know? So it's a kind of a convoluted plan, but nonetheless, when I read that the Avengers were disassembled, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because the Avengers that I know today, they're very quick to do things like this.
Yeah.
They're very dramatic these days. So like if someone betrays them, they'll instantly be like, well, this team is disassembled. Like, we're the original three. You listen to us now.
Yeah.
But we get to this issue where the Vision breaks through the door and he's interrupting Iron Man, Cap, and Thor, and he just passes out. And no one knows what to do except for Tony, who's like, you know what? Technically, Hank Pym is this guy's grandfather. He created the Ultron. Ultron created the Vision. Therefore, you know, Hank Pym might be the only one that knows how to fix this. So Hank Pym shows up, and he's not as Yellow Jacket like we saw. He is Ant-Man again, because Hank Pym has multiple personalities, and we actually get to see a little bit of that, where he goes, that was you. He didn't come as Yellow Jacket or as Giant Man, but as Ant-Man. And he goes, why not, Thunder God? Even though I'm technically an ex-Avenger that said you wanted the original team to gather. Even though I'm technically an ex-Avenger, that call said you wanted the original team to gather by the river. And it was Ant-Man then, so it is Ant-Man now. So he's aware that he changes his fucking identity a lot. So he'll be Goliath, he'll be Yellow Jacket, he'll be Ant-Man. This time he's Ant-Man because they need Ant-Man. So he takes his ant sidekicks and they shrink down into the Vision. And again, this art is insane. 88 through 89, A Journey to the Center of the Android. This is a very well-known story in the comic community. People know about this. This is really cool. You get to see Neil Adams just, flex his pencils. And so Hank Pym goes inside the Vision. And I really like this scene where the Vision's body defenses are trying to fight off Hank Pym and the ants entering his body. And Hank Pym has this moment where he realizes that his ants are getting, killed or hurt by the Vision. And so he goes, human beings are funny. They think no living thing but themselves capable of feeling pain. But that's because they've never heard an ant scream. Well, I have. It sound like, and it's a sound to haunt a lifetime worth of dreams. A sound like lost souls in torment, or the wailing forsaken child. And I don't ever want to hear that sound again. Not ever. And so he tells the ants to leave. He's like, this is a solo mission for the Ant-Man. You guys leave. And up to this point, it's really cool to see Ant-Man give his ants names and to see them as like little sidekicks and to value their lives.
Which they kind of showed in the movie too, as well. Kind of like that was a nod to that.
And so the Vision, Ant-Man goes deeper into the Vision, and this whole issue is basically that until it's not. But the Vision's is being worked on. What'd you guys think of the inside of the Vision?
I thought it was pretty neat, like
different.
Kind of his form of like antibodies and stuff like that, but like it was still like of a not really organic, but more, at that time, how they were thinking. I think they did pretty good.
And I'm looking at page 94, and it's when Hank lands down, and there's like two little vats next to him, and then in the next page we see that he's at the center of the Vision's chest. So I guess, if you wanted to map out the Vision, this would be the perfect issue to do it, because I think those are his lungs right there.
Yeah.
And they look like pink liquid.
Yeah.
It's a little fun tidbit. So going forward, more antibodies start attacking Hank. And Hank realizes that a few of them are making him intangible, just like the Vision becomes intangible himself. So he uses that to his advantage to get to where he needs to go. And when he gets there, you know, there's not a point in this where I saw Hank do anything particular to the Vision. I don't know about you guys, if you guys remember it or seeing it now, but
No.
I don't think he does anything specific. Like,
I
Yeah,
think he just
like
goes to make sure he's not dying.
huh?
I think he just goes in there to make sure he's not dying.
Yeah, okay. That's a good takeaway from it. So he goes in there to make sure he's not dying, and then he comes out and he's like, "Yeah, he's all good. Just need to wait for him to reboot, essentially."
yeah, I think it was just like a loose wire damage or something like the.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like
I
all
think they
that
mentioned that.
complexity of. I
Actually,
think
I
it
think
was
they
like
mentioned that a loose wire,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's just so it's funny how complex the Vision is, like this highly advanced android that's, got the mind of basically Ultron and Hank Pym, and it's like just a little loose wire kind of takes him down, but that's, back in the 70s type of thinking. Like you can have all this stuff, like futuristic kind of things, but then it just takes a simple like,
If a cog in the machine is loose, the whole
yep,
machine's fucked.
yep.
So Hank Pym comes out of the Vision after doing that, and the Vision reminds the Avengers because he's pretty pissed. You can see the Vision's mood change from
Hmm.
this point on as the rest of the book goes forward. He's kind of pissed. He's like, "You three are the reason why my friends are gone," and he's like, "They're all like, what do you mean?" And he's like, "Here, like you guys, um, you guys seemingly disassembled the Avengers, and now the Avengers went to go finish their job, which is protect Marvel. And so they all went to Carol Danvers' farm to find Marvel. And when they got there, they were attacked by three cows that ended up being shape-shifting Skrulls that turned into the Thing, the Human Torch, and Mr. Fantastic. And it was during that fight that the Scarlet Witch and Pietro and the Vision were defeated, but the Vision's body put himself in a little like containment stasis and autopiloted himself back to the Avengers. And that's how that's how we receive the Vision at the beginning of this story, before Hank goes inside of him. And we also see that Goliath was not. We see on page 107 that Goliath was not captured by the initial attack. And we also get revealed that at this farm, there's some Skrulls here that had already captured Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel, and they're watching this all happen, and they're watching Goliath on the screen, and they're trying to find Goliath and Rick Jones. The Thing fights Goliath. Rick Jones outsmarts Human Torch as well, the Skrull as a Human Torch. So the Skrull reveal that they've been on Earth since Fantastic Four #2,
Yeah.
and gave a little like side thing. I don't know if you knew this. So this Fantastic Four #2 was drawn by Jack Kirby, right?
Hmm.
And it had to deal with 4 Skrulls that had come to Earth and caused trouble. And at the last in the last page, after the Fantastic Four turned them into cows, because that's what happened. They mention it in this story that the Fantastic Four turned them into cows and left them for dead. Jack Kirby only drew 3 cows when there was 4 in the original story, and it was
Right.
it was a mistake. He just forgot. But 10 years later, Neil Adams and Roy Thomas were like, let's actually
Play
expand
on
that.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
what happened to the 4th Skrull? And we find out later, it becomes H.R. Craddock, the person who's been trying to do a witch hunt on aliens on Earth is, surprise, an alien.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that 4th scroll actually Super Scroll too?
No,
Also?
so I had to do some research, but the Super Scroll comes into play later. So he was
Okay.
like, if the 4 original scrolls were wave 1, the Super Scroll was wave
Oh,
wave
gotcha.
2.
Okay, gotcha.
And basically we get to see Marvel break out of his like binds, and he's like, all right, now that I'm free, I need to make this little what do they call it? A unibeam, a
Yeah, the
hollow
Unibeam.
unibeam. And he goes, in the hands of the Kree, this is used for instant communication. throughout the galaxy. But in the hands of anyone else who doesn't have the intelligence or the power of the Kree, it's a gun essentially. So he's starting to make it, and he realizes that Carol Danvers is talking to him and saying his name, Marvel. And that's when he realizes, oh shit. He destroys the unibeam, and she goes, why would you do that? And he goes, this lady never knew my name, so you can only be a Skrull. And he turns around, and it is a super Skrull.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a countdown going on. The Avengers are outside, and they're fighting the Fantastic Four, quote unquote. And the Super Skrull defeats Marvel, and the ship leaves. Not before Goliath can attach himself to it, trying to do something. But he just ends up shrinking because he runs out of shrink ray.
Serum.
Yeah, the serum. And he ends up falling down, and Thor catches him. He's not too happy about that. And but yeah, that's basically what happens here in that issue. They're at an all-time low. What was that?
And now we're going into issue 94.
Yeah.
And behold the androids.
Yeah. So, to get through this real quick, the Avengers are instantly trying to pacify the Skrulls that they've captured. They're instantly getting to work. And they're actually contacted by the real Fantastic Four, and they start asking them, like, what do you know about Skrulls? And then he tells them what they know about Skrulls. And the thing is basically telling the Avengers that if you run into the Super Skrull, you're going to get your asses beat, because he has all 4 of our powers combined. And it's basically the thing propping up the Fantastic Four and being like, yeah, like, you couldn't take us on, which is something that we saw. They kind of couldn't. Going forward, the Avengers realize that the Vision is nowhere around. And we cut to where the Vision is, and he flew as fast as he could to the ship before it left Earth's atmosphere. And he has a encounter with the Super Skrull. And he basically enters into a stalemate with the Super Skrull because he turns intangible, and the Super Skrull can't fight him. So he's like, you know what? You can't fight me. I'm going to show you what I'm even here to do. So he pulls up on the Inhumans at Atalan, which is like their little homeland, and he tries to nuke them, essentially. But it doesn't work because Atalan has like a little negative field around it. We get to see a little bit more of that later. But Atalan is okay. So before leaving Earth, this Skrull was like, you know what? Let me just try to bomb this place real quick. Doesn't work, so he goes, all right, well, time to go back to the Skrull homeworld. So they go off, and then the Vision's like, well, I can't do anything here, which I don't think is true. I think the Vision can do a lot right here, but he melodramatically leaves. And when he leaves, we pick up back on the ship where the Super Skrull is telling his plan. He's gonna go back to the Kree, to the Skrull Empire, and he's gonna make the Skrull Emperor. It's because look, the Super Skrull's in exile, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
So he's not really supposed to come back, and he's not supposed to be answered to. Like the way he rose up is not like respectful at all. And as he rolls up to the Skrull homeworld, we get to see the Skrull Emperor, who has a daughter who does not have the Pandusa chin like the rest of the Skrulls.
Yeah.
He's just a normal Skrull lady. And he's kind of a misogynist like the Avengers as well, where he's upset that his only heir is a woman. And he mentions it every page that he's on with his daughter. He mentions that he doesn't like the fact that she's his heir.
Yeah.
Before that, they dispatch the Super Skrull, don't they? They hit him with like a little beam, and the Super Skrull's out of the story. He doesn't come back into the picture at all for the rest of this. But they see what he brought, and what he brought was Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. And the Skrull Emperor realizes what kind of intelligence that he can get from a man of the Kree. So he puts Wanda and Pietro in a little like terrarium with other animals and stuff, and they start having to fight a giant monster, and it doesn't go well for them to the point where Marvel's like, you know what? I will tell you all the secrets to destroying my civilization. Uh, I don't want to see my two friends, two Avengers, go down like this. And that's what's going on at the Skrull homeworld. We cut back to Earth, where Craddock is getting the scientists who had given up the Avengers for what they did at the Arctic up, and they're scanning them to see if they're an alien. And you get to see that these three scientists who snitched on the Avengers are instantly like, yeah, we should have just kept our trap shut. We shouldn't have told anyone anything about what we saw out there. And that's when the Avengers get rolled up on by Warren H. Craddock, or H. Warren Craddock, and S.H.I.E.L.D. appears. And this is a time in Marvel where S.H.I.E.L.D. was just a branch of the U.S. government. Later on in Marvel, S.H.I.E.L.D. becomes more of a world peacekeeping like task force. But here they really are just another branch of the U.S. government. And Fury pulls up. Well, he doesn't pull up himself, but his boys pull up, and they're in the Mandroid costumes, or robot suits. And Goliath, starts fighting, and he gets zapped. We see a big fight between the Avengers, and there's this panel here that's really funny where Iron Man is telling Cap, like, don't throw the shield. They can use magnets and they'll move it away. And he goes, well, how do you know that, chum? And he's like, well, Tony Stark invented these. He made these for S.H.I.E.L.D. And this is a time that, I don't know if you picked up on it, but this is a time where no one knew that Iron Man was Tony Stark.
Yeah, I
So
caught
he
that.
references a lot of that.
Tony Stark.
Yeah. The Iron Man to the public's eye is Tony Stark's bodyguard at this point.
Yeah.
And we get to see that only Iron Man knows how to defeat these mandroids. And how does he do it? By activating the roller skates at the bottom of his suit. Yep. Because they wouldn't have anticipated the roller skates. So they're fighting the mandroids, and as they're fighting the mandroids, Triton from the Inhumans appears. And we jump straight into issue 95. I know we're running short on time here, but we're rolling through these last three. Triton appears, and we get to see what Triton was doing an hour before he accidentally appeared at Avengers Mansion. He came to New York to seek help, and he gets attacked by fishermen, and then he steals a car, and he goes underground, and then the next time we see him again, he pops up above ground in front of Avengers Mansion, and he's seeing the Avengers fight the Mandroids, and they're all kind of, not getting their ass beat, but they are sort of until
getting handed to him.
Yeah, and we get to see Nick Fury talking to H. Craddock, and he's like, I gave you the men and the manpower, but I don't really believe in what you're doing. He goes, I remember a time when when Americans were pointing fingers at each other, and we had Japanese internment camps on our shores. And he's like, I don't want to go back to that time. So from this point on, like, I'm not going to help you the way you want to be helped. But just in time, something that was cool to see drawn on later was Iron Man removing those little hip repulsors that he's got, and then shooting a beam at the mandroids to shut them off. It's pretty cool because now going back, you can see those little discs are on him, which I never realized. And then we get to find out what Triton's deal is, and Triton tells us, the readers, what is actually happening in another book called Amazing Adventures 5 through 8. I actually read the first two of that because it's like an anthology book, and only half of the book is dedicated towards this story. But essentially, Black Bolt's brother, who we also find out about this later, but we'll get through it now. Black Bolt's brother usurps him at the Inhumans like throne, and they send Black Bolt to New York, and he no, it's San Francisco, and he has no recollection of who he is other than he can't speak. So Black Bolt, the leader of the Inhumans, is somewhere in San Francisco, and he has no clue who he is, and that's why Triton is here. He's trying to ask the Avengers for help, and that's when the Vision instantly is like, guys, we have important things to do right now. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Marvel are kidnapped by the Skrulls, and we have no clue where they are or how to get to them, and you guys want to go help the Inhumans right now. Like this can't be done. We need to focus on one thing. But they instantly are like, hold on there, Android. You're being a little bit forthright right now. You're worrying too much. How about we just split up the team? And so they split up the team, and it's Vision, Thor, and who else?
Iron Man.
And Iron Man together. And their job is to go into outer space somehow. The other team is Captain
Goliath,
America, Goliath, and
Trident.
Triton. So they, I guess one team leaves and the other one stays, because that's what we find out later. Is that the Thor?
And Rick went with them too.
Oh yeah. So basically the powerhouses stay behind and they fight the Mandroids some more. And then we cut to where Black Bolt is, and he's fighting some people that want to use him to rob people. That's what I got from this.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't really want him for anything else. And Black Bolt's been hanging around this kid. And I read this little Amazing Adventures thing that was going on, and it's basically just Black Bolt living in San Francisco, and he saves this kid from being harassed by his uncle, who wanted to use the kid to break into small places. You know, like how Yondu talks about why he kept Peter Quill around. Yeah, basically that. Black Bolt stops that from happening, and he basically adopts this kid, and the kid just follows him everywhere. And that's when the Avengers show up. I like the scene where Cap throws his shield and hits the guy in the back of the head.
A couple of like what you call them, what you call the little squares again?
What? The squares?
No, yeah, in the comic book, what they call it again?
Like the panels.
Panels, yeah. Like he sends the shield out a couple panels later, and then it comes back.
Yeah. And that's when Triton tells Black Bolt about what's going on. They all get in the ship and they head back. I think they're heading back to New York.
Yeah.
And then we get to see a little bit of what Black Bolt's thinking, and he's remembering a time way before any of these stories take place where him and his brother were fighting, and he speaks for the first time, and it makes his brother go insane. So that's like the main plot point of the Inhuman stories, is that Black Bolt made his brother go insane by speaking, and therefore Black Bolt doesn't speak anymore. And whenever his brother starts lashing out, Black Bolt feels bad because he's the one who caused his brother to lose his mind like that.
Okay.
And we cut back to the Mandroids fighting the powerhouses, Iron Man and Thor and the Vision. And Thor, they dispatch the Mandroids, and Thor starts teleporting these Avengers out into
space.
No, they go to Atalan, the Inhumans homeworld.
Okay.
And they're met by the other Avengers who show up with Black Bolt. And Black Bolt, in order to go in there, Black Bolt, speaks, and the Atalan dome, which we saw earlier, starts to collapse. And the Inhumans are like, "Oh my God, it's Black Bolt, and he's led outsiders to our world. Let's go kill him. Let's kill our king." And it's not until Black Bolt speaks, I think the way that it's written is that he's not even yelling. He's barely whispering under his breath, but the entire Inhuman population can hear what he's saying. And he goes, "Hear me, O people. I am Black Bolt, your rightful ruler. Lay down your weapons and obey." Instantly, everyone's like, "Yeah, we don't really fuck with Maximilius like that. You're the king." And as we go forward, go ahead.
Oh, and my just to remind people the reason why he's whispering though, Black Bolt,
Hmm.
like just because his voice is just so powerful that it's deemed one of the most like destructive forces in the Marvel universe.
Yep. If Black Bolt ever said his name at like the cadence that I'm saying right now, he'd
Hmm.
blow a hole through the earth wherever his mouth is pointing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the deal with the Inhumans. I think we kind of glossed over it earlier, but the Inhumans are just Kree offspring who have developed their own powers. They're like mutants,
Yeah.
but they have like a whole royal like thing going on, a whole regal like life. Um, the Avengers show up right when Maximilian is talking to, I guess, a Kree warrior that he had made a deal. So the deal gets expanded upon later, but for time, we're gonna go over it now. Where Maximilian was like, "Hey, I'll take control of the Inhuman people if you let me become the regent of this planet in the name of the Kree Empire." And Ronan was, basically okay with that deal as long as Maximilian could pull his end, which he couldn't. And then at this very moment, the Kree who are there at Adelan, they grab Rick Jones for some reason. No one knows why until later. They grab Rick Jones and they get into a saucer and they fly away. And the days won. They won here at Adelan. It was kind of anticlimactic. This whole thing only happens over 3 pages.
Yeah.
When they get to Adelan, and we get a cool little speech from Captain America where he's like, "We're coming for you, Kree and Skrulls alike. Nothing can stay our hand from vengeance. Nothing but death." And he's holding his fist out to the heavens.
Yeah.
And
Sounds like Captain America speech.
yep. So last 2 issues, and we'll get through this quick because I personally think the writers went through this quick. The Avengers get help from Nick Fury, and Nick Fury sends them off into space with one of their I guess Shield has spaceships like this. They send them out into space, and they get to the end of to the start of the Andromeda Galaxy, I believe. Let's see.
Yeah, the Andromeda Swarm, where that issue's kind of saying, or where like the battle, I guess.
Yeah, so they they reach a bunch of Skrulls, the Skrull Armada, basically the Imperial Armada, and I I don't know who does it, but on the Skrull side, they see a bunch of Kree warships, but they never have a moment where any of the Avengers like cast an illusion spell or anything, because there's no Kree there that we know of. But anyway, they go forward, and the Avengers start fighting the Skrull warships. It's insane how the Vision and Thor just go up to one of the ships and just open it. They just pulled it open, a
No.
big hole on page 171.
Well, Thor just throws his hammer.
Yeah, he throws his hammer, and then the hole that the hammer makes, they just open it. It's pretty cool. They fight the Skrulls, and Captain America shows up. Goliath shows up on his ship, and at the same time, the Skrull Emperor is like, you know what? I've already got Marvel doing what I need him to do. So you're just distracting these Avengers here. So I'm not really worried about it. And it's revealed that Marvel. This is a part that got a little confusing for me, and I had to hear other people talk about this and see what happened. So I'm going to go through it and see what you guys thought happened the first time around. But Marvel actually completed the hollow projector thing that he was working on. And so he used that to project himself away so that he could sneak up on the Skrulls who were going to, check up on him. And that's how he got out of that. I don't know. Did that translate to you guys? Like, did that come across the page?
Now that you say it, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was reading it, I was like, "What the hell?" I'm very confused here.
Yeah.
But if you look at 176,
okay,
in the middle panel, what you're saying, it kind of explains it right there because he's sitting there with the machine or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and
But
then they
he's
put
also
their hand
pushing.
through him.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, what you're saying is right. I was, I'm reading through this and I'm just like, okay, once again, we'll talk about it in a minute. But this graphic novel was a little bit more difficult for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the portions and part of the beginning that kind of got me.
Yeah, I get it. And that's when, when Marvel escapes and he starts letting Wanda and Pietro out. That's when the Emperor is like, you know what, execute Plan Delta. And what is Plan Delta? Plan Delta is basically launching a ship with a bunch of weapons, like bombs, essentially, to Earth. And the the only one that can stop it is Goliath. So Cap, gets into transmission with Goliath, and he goes, "Calling Goliath to Starling 1. I've only got time to say this once. Stop that vessel now, leaving the main ship at any cost, including your life. Do you read me?" And Goliath goes, "I read you." And he goes and he attaches himself onto the ship, and that's when he breaks through. And that's the last we ever see of Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't, we never find out what happens to the ship. But anyway, we catch up again with Ronan the Accuser, who has Rick Jones, because as we saw in the last issue, he had some Inhumans that were, I mean, not Inhumans. He had some Kree working with the Inhumans, and as they were leaving, they grabbed Rick Jones, and he even asked the people, "Why did you grab this kid?" And one of the guys like, "I don't know. I felt like it's something that we needed to do." So, Rick Jones is arguing with Ronan the Accuser, and Ronan's just like, "You know what, kid? I like your spunk, and that's why I'm not going to kill you right now. I'm going to make you my slave. My meat slave," he says. "My body slave."
Right.
I don't know what he means by that, but
Yeah, it was very vague on that. Like,
and also, I don't know if you guys noticed, but they started drawing the Kree different here
mhm,
as well. Like the Kree are pink, or they're like humans. They have pink
yeah.
flesh when previously Ronin was blue. And I don't know why. Also, in other depictions of the Kree that I've seen later on, they are always blue. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. But basically, Ronin's actually telling Rick some important information, and he tells him why Earth is so important to both the Kree and the Skrulls, and it's that it's the exact midway point between the two empires. Also paralleling the Pacific War, which was 20 years before this, where all the Pacific Islands were midway points between Japan and the United States and
Mhm.
their ongoing invasions. So Earth is just a stopping point for both armies, essentially. And
And it's funny how the Kree
mhm.
really didn't think of it as a, necessary until that they noticed that the scroll,
Yeah,
you know,
and so that they noticed that the Skrulls were also there
yeah.
or
So they
had
were
a
like, you
presence
know
there.
what?
Yeah, so that's the thing that they also go into. This is perfect, this little last steamroll. But Ronan puts Rick into like a little box, like below him, like a little like where he's keeping the Kree Supreme Intelligence. Who, when Ronan usurped the Kree throne, he put the Supreme Intelligence like in a basement essentially, and the Supreme Intelligence gets to talking to Rick, and he starts telling Rick that the Skrulls and the Kree are going to constantly be at war with one another because they've already evolved to their peak. There's nothing more that they can do as a civilization than to conquer other worlds and to, say that they have a space on the map more than the other one. This is one thing that the Kree and the Skrull are going to do forever because they can't do anything else. They're always going to be warring together. But humans, on the other hand, have the potential to be greater, and we've seen that. As we've seen in Earth 616 in this universe, that the Avengers are a thing, the mutants are a thing, the Inhumans are a thing, Eternals are a thing. These are all things that are popping off on Earth. Earth is popping in this like era. There's unlimited potential for humans and what they can do. And that's when Supreme Intelligence tells Rick that he's the one who has been orchestrating this whole thing. He's the one who had the Kree soldier grab him and bring him here. And he also tells Rick that you have the potential to do those things that I'm telling you about. So I don't. It's not really shown how, but as we read, this is what we're presented with. The Kree gives Rick this power, and with this power, Rick goes into the negative zone, and he runs into Annihilus again. And then we get to the last issue where Rick is. We pick up with Rick fighting Annihilus. Well, not fighting. He's just encountering Annihilus, and he's going through the events of this last 10 issues. But yeah, Rick Jones is seeing all the events that are going on throughout the galaxy at this very moment. And at this point too is when I realized where everyone was, right? So there are no Avengers at the Kree homeworld right now. It's just Rick Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's fighting the Skrull Armada. Goliath is on his way. He's in a nuke essentially on the way to Earth, and Wanda and Pietro are inside the throne world of the Skrulls fighting. And Rick Jones leaves the negative zone not before shooting a giant beam out of his forehead into Annihilus to get Annihilus to back off of him. And we pick back up with Pietro cannonballing around as he does. And we see Mar-Vell making another hollow beam in page 191. He just destroyed one. Don't know why he's creating another one, but he is. And we also, through the course of the story, have seen that the Anel, who is the daughter of the Skrull king or emperor, she is very, like, why are we doing this? Why are we torturing this man? Why are we going to make him destroy his own empire? She is kind of like the lighter side of the Skrulls, and we find out later, 20 years after this, that Anel and Mar-Vell, during that brief moment that Mar-Vell created the new hollow thing, and he transported himself, there's 5 minutes in between that. Apparently, in this, guys, they had enough time to go sire a child. And later down the line, 20 years from now, they invent Hulkling, who is the son of Captain Marvel and the son of Anel, the Skrull Empress. But nonetheless, we go forward, and Mar-Vell sends a transmission to the Kree with his hollow projector, and then destroys it again because he can't risk the Skrulls getting their hands on it. And at this time, Rick is still going through the negative zone until he finds the portal, and he's back in front of the Kree Supreme Intelligence, and he starts talking to him about, like, hey, you have this potential, use it. The Kree Ronan sends in some people to finally dispatch Rick, and at that time, Rick uses his newfound powers as a human, fully evolved by the Kree Supreme Intelligence, to conjure up a bunch of heroes to fight for him. And it's Captain America, Human Torch, and Namor, and a bunch of other 40s comic characters as well. And we see them all introduce themselves as they're fighting the Kree, which is, as comics are. Stan had a very clear rule where he's like, every comic you pick up could be someone's first. So if you have to introduce a character by their name and have them say it, have them say it. It just works out better for everyone. And I tend to agree in these types of cases.
For the notes also.
Yeah, the notes as well. So we see these conjurings fight the Kree. And Rick sends a unibeam, essentially. Rick is just given God powers at this point. This is where the story gets a little like jumping the shark for me. And Rick just freezes everything. Everything throughout the galaxy. The Skrulls fighting, the Kree fighting, everything's frozen. And the Avengers are like, what's going on? But Mar-Vell knows. Mar-Vell knows exactly what's going on. And they start heading towards Rick, I think. Yes. They start heading towards Rick. And they... Hold on. No, I think I skipped a bit. My bad. But this the Kree Supreme Intelligence tells Rick, like, hey, focus your energy on Earth and think about what's going on over there. Craddock, I'm getting a fade in on H. Warren Craddock, the guy who ran the Avengers off the Earth. He makes Craddock turn into his true self, which is a Skrull. And seemingly everyone there just beats him to death.
Yeah.
So he's talking to a bunch of people that are anti-alien. And he's like, yeah, we need to make sure that we, get all these aliens off our planet. We need to find them. We need to treat them like socialists, yada, yada, yada. And then when Craddock gets turned into a Skrull, his true form, they're like, hey, you're exactly who we hate. And they just start beating him to death. And that is the end of that. The Craddock storyline. He gets turned into a Skrull and he gets beaten to death. Rick in page 204 goes, he's dead, and in a way I killed him. It was my fault. And the Kree's like, nah, he loaded his own gun. Like, don't worry about it. And he starts talking about what I was mentioning earlier about the Kree. For untold eons, Skrull and Kree have stalked the cosmic corridors like twin races of malevolent gods, never knowing that each of their star-spanning clans has reached a dead end. Live a billion years, neither will ever advance one more rung up the ladder of evolution. Now they can but snarl at each other across a sea of space, hating both each other and the human race, which they subconsciously sense to be their ultimate superiors. And, this gets told to Rick, and Rick collapses because he uses so much power to stop everyone in the universe previously. And that's when the Avengers show up, and the Kree Supreme Intelligence reminds Mar-Vell, like, I can only influence humans through their dreams. So this whole time I've been kind of talking to Rick Jones. So that time in the courtroom where he, felt the connection between him and Mar-Vell, and he left to go see Carol at the farm. That was the Kree Supreme Intelligence. And anything that Rick has been feeling throughout the story is probably influenced by the Supreme Intelligence. And they also remind Mar-Vell that he needs to give his life force so that Rick can survive. Otherwise, Rick would just die of exhaustion because, he finally tapped into his abilities. And Mar-Vell has a moment where he goes, but then I'd be a prisoner again, like before, in the negative zone. Like, I don't want to do that. And then he gets reminded, then perhaps you have helped doom Rick Jones after all. And Mar-Vell's like, you're right. Give me a moment, I guess. And so he takes a moment and he looks at the Kree, and he remembers Anel, who this is the first time that they even mention the other moment to think of Anel, the daughter of the Skrull Emperor, and now to be regent of the ancient race. Though once for an instant he could have hoped she would become even more. Never once was I like, hey, Anel and Mar-Vell, they'd be good together. They never
Right. Like
talked.
I was wondering what was that about. Like
Yeah, they never talked to each other that whole time. But they wrote this like that so that 30 years later, someone could be like, yeah, they had a kid in like 5 minutes. Then Mar-Vell's like, I'm ready. So then he transfers his energy into Rick Jones, and it's exactly the status quo that it was at the beginning of the story, where they have the whole Shazam situation going on. He has to hit the Nega Band so that Mar-Vell can appear. And the Avengers go back to Earth, not before being introduced to the real H. Warren Craddock, who gives them the off the hook speech. You guys are good. Nick Fury here told me what happened while the Skrull took over my identity, and the Avengers are free to go. And that is the story. I wish it was less anticlimactic than that, but that is the story. And what did you guys think?
You want to go ahead, Victor?
My thoughts on the book. It was good, very good. It was more like if you had to put levels of comic book for comic book readers, I felt like the other two we read was more like my beginner's level.
Mm-hmm.
I felt maybe this was more intermediate, higher level type reading.
Sure.
If I knew how to read better a comic book, like as far as how it went, I probably would have loved it. I'm not saying I didn't love it, but
Mm-hmm.
it was just easier for me to read the other two than this one. One thing I'll say that I did like was all the little the notes going back to the other books, other comic books.
Mm-hmm.
I know that helps out comic book readers like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole little like they always explained the scene,
Yep.
so you didn't have to like wondering like what was he feeling or not feeling. So that was really cool. Other than that, I mean, I thought it was a good book. I liked it. Um, DC was probably more my cup of tea, but this is a really good book. It was just a little confusing at the beginning.
Yeah. How'd you feel about the pacing, like towards the end?
I think I when you said they kind of rushed it, I kind of felt that way too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a movie. Like you watch it and watch it and watch it, and then all of a sudden everything happens in 5 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then the ending, it was kind of like okay, it ended, and then it was like okay, everybody's good, and let's go to Applebee's, and then kind of like
Let's go get shawarma.
I know,
yeah.
right? That's all it needed was that scene.
But I do understand that this is part of many other things, so
Yeah.
this is not like something like this is not like Avengers and it's over. This is part of other situations, the other books.
Yeah. And Gabe, what'd you think?
Well, I loved it, and I get why you kind of picked it too, because it was like after the Silver Age of Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
at a time where people were leaving, doing other things, so it was kind of a also a kick away from the Fantastic Four, which, like I said before, it was the flagship group of Marvel. So,
Mm-hmm.
and as well to open up like the whole space thing, because what I was expecting was gonna be more of
A war.
yeah, like a big war, but in a nutshell, it was basically the Kree and the Skrull deciding that, you know what, neither one is gonna have Earth. But I mean, the visuals on it was great, and again with the notes, I love that because it kind of helped, like at first, like what Victor said, it was kind of like hard to get. I actually had to put it down and take a day or two and
Mm-hmm.
then go back at it because I was not like lost, but just like it felt jumpy. But then
Yeah.
once it started rolling steam, like I think once the scroll kind of got introduced, that's where it really, like, for me, like, okay, this is starting to get like better,
Mm-hmm.
and like the ball was rolling on the whole story. But then the end, it was what it was, but I get it. It kind of just leaves that door open for more too,
Mm-hmm.
and it did kind of let you want, or left you wanting to know what's going to happen next, or in other issues, or along the story like that. And um for Marvel, it was a time where they needed something new, and that's exactly what they did with this book here.
Yeah.
you know
Hell yeah.
uh,
I
Um,
I definitely feel the same. As far as like when things started to steamroll and
mhm.
things started to roll. There's moments when I was reading this where I was like, oh my god, I would turn the page and I would see so much text. I feel
Yeah,
the same way that I felt when we were reading The Dark Knight,
yeah,
where I was like, oh god, I got to get through a wall of text. But like with the Dark Knight, as soon as I started reading it, it started like going by real fast. Where I was like, oh, I'm interested in what's going on.
yeah.
I think Roy Thomas is really good at that.
Hmm.
That we find out in this book. There's not a moment where I'm like, I don't need to hear what this person's saying. I wanted to read everything, even the shit that Jarvis was saying when they
Yeah,
were getting served. I was like, this is interesting, and
you know,
it's
the
cool that he wrote this whole thing too. You're
the,
saying
voca-
that?
the vocabulary is very very advanced too.
Oh yeah, and you can see, you can see the range of vocabulary too when whenever Rick Jones was talking in the beginning, and when he talks throughout the whole thing, he has like that 60s early 70s like little slang to him.
yeah,
And before we go here, I wanted to highlight that at the whole like second half is drawn by Neil Adams, and I think it looks perfect. Like he's very skilled with his inking and his pencils. But for some reason, in the last issue, they kick Neil Adams off and they bring back John Buscema. And in doing some research for this, I found out that the only reason why this whole thing was made was because Neil Adams wanted to keep drawing the Skrulls and the Kree go to war together. But in the last issue, they kick him off.
yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, there's like I don't know if it's in the end because there's an afterword written by Neil Adams or in the foreword by Roy Thomas, where they say it. They're like, yeah, the only reason why we did this is because Neil wanted to keep drawing this event. And I just find it real weird that he was kicked off the finale.
Right. But I think also what made this kind of good also was because we did The Dark Knight and we did Kingdom Come, which were more like newer age, and this
Hmm.
kind of like a throwback of you know, you see the transition kind of like
Yeah.
from classic comic style and writing to kind of going like what it was gonna lead all the way up until maybe like
Hmm.
the late 80s and 90s, which you see a lot still today. But this was definitely another reason why I felt you probably picked this, because it was a big, I mean, at the time too, it was such a big deal of story wise, and
Hmm.
where like DC was kind of really doing their thing, and Marvel. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if either because someone left DC and went to Marvel and helped with this, or the vice versa. So that's was another
So
reason why they.
what I learned is that after this, this inspired a lot of people at DC to start writing more stories that have like arcs like this,
Hmm.
and this is a clear like you know, I guess this is a template for what would come in the later years for DC, as far as like the Crisis on Infinite Earths, or even at Marvel within House. They ended up doing Secret Wars a couple
Yeah.
of years after this, which is the biggest crossover event ever in comic book history.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, so what you said earlier about our previous books that we read and how it ties back to this one, I think, personally, we read to start off, we read the comic that killed this type of story.
Yeah.
And then we read Kingdom Come, which was a comic that rebirthed this type of story. And then now we're back at this, before all that, that type of story. This was the Silver Age when things were a little bit more heroic
Hmm.
and cut and dry. It even gets to the point too. Earlier, I mentioned Rick Jones saying, we can't tell who's a good guy anymore without keeping score. This is right around that time when things started becoming like that. Because if we jump 10 years before this in the 60s, it was very cut and dry.
Yeah.
This is a good guy, this is a bad guy. But now it's, a little bit different. Go ahead, Dad.
No, no, no. Unfortunately, I'm going to cut you off because you can, between you guys and me, when me listening and you guys going, you go 2 or 3 hours, and
Yep.
I always got to be the bad guy.
That's understandable.
It's always got to be the bad guy. I know we have no type of rating system as far as I would say, and I think we rate it differently every time we read a book.
Sure.
But let's just do a 1 through 10, Gabe.
I'm gonna say this is a solid 8 for me, just because I enjoyed the other two more. So, but
Hmm.
this was still very entertaining.
All right, Vic.
Uh, so I'm really into Avengers comics right now, and I've been reading a lot of Brian Michael Bendis's run of the Avengers from 2003 all the way to 2010, and a lot of it is references to this era of Avengers. So being able to read this was very nice. I got to see a lot of things that are talked about in that era that are birthed here, especially. And I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. This was really good for me. It's really cool because Marvel is one continuous universe. It's been the same since the 60s and 40s. It's not until 2015 when things reboot and we get a little bit of a like leeway to do whatever we want. But everything in Marvel from 1940 to now is essentially canon. So we get to see like where things were at this point. So in the 70s, no one knew who Tony Stark was. No one knew that he was Iron Man. And Shield was just a branch of the US government. So seeing all this, how it was back then, was really interesting. So I give it a high score.
Who? I don't think my score really matters because I'm just starting to read all these. But in my untrained comic book eye, I would
Uh-huh.
probably big Gabe like about 7 or 8.
Uh-huh.
Just because it was a little difficult to keep track of everything. but it was interesting to see the different types of comic book heroes interacting with each other, and even some of the, the way Captain America was, or Iron Man was, or even seeing the origin of the kiss between Vision and
Scarlet Witch.
Scarlet Witch. So
Hmm.
that was all interesting to see. So that's why I thought it was very interesting. It's just my deductions on the score was just a little bit hard to keep track of. Um, but I will say, like I mentioned this before, the vocabulary was very advanced, so I could see a kid having a little bit of trouble.
Hmm.
Okay, guys. Once again, another great comic book episode. I really appreciate you guys' help. Vic's gonna get back to us with the next story, so we can get. Most of the time, Gabe and I have to order these books, so
Yeah.
Vic gives us a little bit of time. We get them ordered, and then we read them. As you know, we're doing this once a month. Next month in October, we're going to be coming back with the Rhyme and Reasoning regular podcast. And hopefully, Gabe, you'll join us for a couple of those.
Yeah.
And beyond, we talk a little bit about Vic's generation and how it's messing up the world, and how our generation of presidents is going to kill the world.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to actually have some fun in those episodes because we got the election coming up. So it's going to
Yeah.
matter. Um,
Do you
Once
think
again,
the comic book club is just going to be like a little bit of a whenever we can type thing?
I think we can continue going with the once a month.
Okay, that sounds good to
All
me.
right.
Yeah.
Gabe, you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah. On Facebook at Gabriel Feliciano, or on Instagram at Gabe's Picks, or Gabe's Picks. Yeah, 22.
Okay, Vic.
You can find me at Victorino_MP4 on Instagram.
All right, and you can get Rhyme and Reason and Rhyme and Reasoning underscore podcast on Instagram. Been a little inactive recently because work, but we're gonna get a little bit more active on that on Instagram. And you can find me there, or you can find me Mendez Vic on Instagram. And once again, we thank you guys again for taking an hour and a half with us to listen to us speak and listen to the love Vic and Gabe have for comic books, and me try to be in their world. But till then, we'll talk to you guys next month. Guys, once again, thank you. Any closing thoughts?
Gabe?
Just keep reading, and looking forward to the next one. It's like
All
Yeah,
right.
I
need
guess
a new injection already.
All right. Victor, any closing thoughts?
just like Gabe said, keep reading, and Excelsior readers, stay true believers.
And I think Vic mentioned this before, and I'll just repeat it. Make sure you support your local comic book store.
Of course.
Yep,
All right,
definitely.
guys. See you in the next month. Enjoy. Have a good weekend. Take
All right.
Hell
care.
yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
Peace.
See you.